Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are cracking open a mystery that has plagued Harry Potter fans for decades. But I want to be clear, this is more than just some fandom spec. It is, I think, the central piece of connective tissue that transforms Albus Dumbledore from, a merely powerful, wise old wizard into the terrifyingly omniscient orchestrating force that really holds the entire magical...
It absolutely is. I mean, it truly is the singular question that dictates our whole understanding of the saga. And the question is, how did Dumbledore know with such terrifying certainty and speed exactly what happened on the night Voldemort attacked the Potters?
Right.
It's far too easy to just wave this off and say, oh, well, Dumbledore just figured it out.
Yeah.
But the sources we've analyzed today suggest the precision of his reaction, the immediate action. It points to something deeply personal.
That's something he'd experienced.
A mechanism he understood because he had lived through it before.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission today is a deep dive into the source material shared by one of you, our listeners, unpacking powerful, almost tragic, and that theory is Dumbledore's foundational knowledge of the unique protection that saved Harry wasn't academic. It wasn't something he read in a book. It was a memory. It was the echo of a sacrifice made for him, reverberating across 5 decades of magic.
And you can see it right from the jump. I mean, think about that pivotal moment in the first book, the very beginning of the whole adventure. Dumbledore meets Professor McGonagall on Privet Drive.
Yeah.
And by the time he arrives, which is at most the night after the attack Voldemort struck on Halloween, Dumbledore concludes, just like that, definitively, that the most feared dark wizard in generations has been, quote, temporarily defeated.
And McGonagall, who is, she's no slouch, she's a brilliant witch, she asks the fundamental question, the one we are all still asking. How? How did the killing curse, the Avada Kedavra, fail? And Dumbledore gives that famously elusive answer, that seemingly humble admission. He just says, I don't know.
And that's the moment. That's the moment the theory pivots. The sources we looked at argue that this was less an admission of ignorance and more a piece of carefully guarded theatrical misdirection.
So he didn't mean, I have no idea.
No. He didn't mean, I have no idea what happened in that house. He meant, I don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the final confirmed mechanism, but I have a solid, painful theory based on my own history that I can test in like 2 minutes.
That makes so much more sense when you look at what he does next, because his actions are incredibly rapid and specific.
Yeah.
What does he do immediately after this conversation with McGonagall? He takes Harry, and at the Dursleys' doorstep, he performs the Bond of Blood charm. He doesn't go back to Hogwarts to research ancient magic. He doesn't consult a single book. He enacts this ancient, complex piece of protective magic right then and there.
Precisely. I mean, if he truly didn't know the cause of Voldemort's downfall, his actions would have been far more generalized. He would have used standard, textbook protective enchantment, a shield charm, something like that. Instead, he deployed perhaps the most sophisticated, precise, and emotionally dependent charm in the entire canon. It's like a surgeon performing an emergency operation without taking an x-ray.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what the internal damage.
Okay, so let's unpack this Bond of Blood charm, because it feels like the magical receipt, right? It's the confirmation spell that allows Dumbledore to validate his immediate suspicion.
It's the linchpin.
Yeah.
It is the linchpin of the entire theory, and its mechanics tie directly into the unique protection that saved Harry.
So what is it exactly?
The charm is a masterpiece of specialized ancient magic. This is not the kind of spell work you learn in a Hogwarts classroom.
Right.
Its purpose is singular, to keep Harry safe from Voldemort. But the mechanism is incredibly stringent. It relies on the continuation of the magical protection that was already established that night.
And what are those constraints? What are the rules for it to work?
The sources confirm that for the Bond of Blood charm to successfully activate and persist, 2 things must be true. It's a 2-factor system.
Okay.
First, Harry must have already been the recipient of sacrificial love, that specific, powerful enchantment that's enacted when someone dies choosing to save him. That has to be in place.
So it's a prerequisite.
It's a prerequisite.
Right, exactly.
And second, he must remain at the house of a blood relative of the person who died, performing that ultimate sacrifice.
It can't be just any relative.
No, it has to be a direct blood link to the sacrificing party. It's incredibly specific.
So just to paint the picture here, Dumbledore arrives on a dark holding an infant who is, by all accounts, the first and only person in documented history to ever survive curse.
Ever.
He places this infant at the house of his mother's sister, Petunia Dursley, and casts this tremendously ancient, specific, powerful charm, the mechanics of which are only relevant if a very particular, very rare type of magic has already been performed.
And the moment the spell successfully worked, when the bond of blood is enacted and the protection settles upon 4 Privet Drive, Dumbledore instantly has his answer. It's confirmed in a way that no witness or magical artifact could ever provide.
He can safely, definitively assume that Lily Potter was the one who cast Sacrificial Love.
He knows it for a fact.
Because the bond only activates when you are with the blood relative of the sacrificing party. Had James died for him, the charm wouldn't work at Petunia's house.
Exactly. It confirms that Lily's death wasn't just a tragic murder at the hands of Voldemort. It was a choice. It was the crucial moment that enacted this powerful enchantment.
And that's what lets Dumbledore surmise correctly that this unique, potent act of sacrificial love is what caused the Avada Kedavra to backfire.
It rebounded on the caster, blasting Voldemort to smithereens and temporarily defeating him. The whole puzzle just snaps together in that moment for Dumbledore.
It all clicks into place with startling elegance. I mean, the Bond of Blood acts as the perfect, immediate, real-time confirmation spell for Dumbledore's theory. It verifies the cause, the effect, and the mechanism for the next 17 years of protection.
Yes, it answers a lot of questions about his immediate actions and his certainty that. But, and this is the big but, here is the major unresolved knowledge gap that the sources highlight. This is the core reason this deep dive exists.
Okay.
This still doesn't explain how Dumbledore knew about sacrificial love as a charm in the first place, or how its specific, exception to the rule mechanics even work.
That is the real snag in the story, isn't it? He's responding to a unique, unprecedented circumstance in real time. He didn't have time to convene the Wizengamot or, pull out some dusty, forbidden pamphlet on ancient love magic and the answer.
Not at all.
He had the answer in his head before he cast the confirmation charm.
If Harry is literally the only known person in recorded magical history to ever survive the killing curse, how could there possibly be a textbook? How could there be a history book detailing the exact counter-enchantment caused by a mother's sacrifice? It's a singularity.
And the sheer specificity of the Bond of Blood charm implies an intimate, working knowledge of how sacrificial love functions. The fact that he knows it requires a blood relative state, that's not common knowledge.
No, that is deeply restricted ancient magical lore. This isn't something you pick up in NDWT level class.
So the key takeaway here is the real-time response fact. Dumbledore immediately knew what specific arcane ancient magic was at play. And he knew the precise charm, the Bond of Blood, needed to leverage it. It's too specific to be a genius guy.
And this is where the theory shifts entirely, from simple observation to profound implication. The sources suggest there is only one logical, coherent reason for Dumbledore to have this instant, deep, intimate, and functional knowledge of such a rare phenomenon. He, like Harry, must have had sacrificial love cast upon him. He knew because he was the only other person alive who had personally received this singular, powerful protection.
And if that's true, it means we have to trace that protection back to the darkest, most fraught moment in Dumbledore's own, his relationship with Gellert Grindelwald and the death of Ariana.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because now we pivot from analyzing a single event to the meta-narrative structure of the entire saga. We have to dive into this idea that this conflict is a magical echo, sort of sounding off through time one generation after the next. And that echo is what provides Dumbledore with the historical context to understand Harry.
The Harry Potter saga, particularly the central conflict, is just littered with these incredibly unique and confusing brands of magic that operate with exceptions to the usual rules. These aren't standard Hogwarts spells. They are foundational magical laws dealing with fundamentals like death, love, and fate. We're talking about the mechanics of twin cores, priori incantatem, the bond of blood, sacrificial love, obscurials, and of course the deathly hallow. They exist outside the standard curriculum because they are, frank, dangerous to study.
And we have to start with the most famous of these unique objects, the Elder Wand. We know Dumbledore became its master after winning it from Gellert Grindelwald in their legendary duel in 1945. But the problem is the information we have about this duel, which supposedly determined the fate of the wizarding world for decades, is notoriously unreliable.
It's almost farcical in its provenance. That's a crucial point we have to spend some time on. How do we even know about this epical event? We hear about it first on the back of a chocolate frog card.
A children's toy.
A novelty item. Then we have Rita Skeeter's notoriously slant, sensationalized, and deeply untrustworthy biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. Skeeter's account is so inflammatory that it suggests there wasn't even a true duel at all, maybe a white flag or a surrender.
And then the third and perhaps most unreliable source of all, Dumbledore's conversation with Harry at King's Cross.
Right.
which takes place after Harry's temporary death. I mean, the King's Cross scene is arguably happening entirely inside Harry's head or in some form of afterlife limbo. So we are literally dealing with information supplied by chocolate frog cards, yellow journalism, and potentially dead boys.
It's a mess. And yet, despite the messy provenance, the core fact remained. Dumbledore won, Grindelwald lost, and Dumbledore took the Elder Wand. But this leads directly to the Elder Wand paradox, which is really the starting point for our theory of Dumbledore's protection.
The paradox is simple, right? Dumbledore winning doesn't make sense if Grindelwald was truly wielding the Elder Wand. The supposedly unbeatable wand, the one destined to guarantee victory for its master.
Dumbledore himself was modest about it. He suggests that Grindelwald acknowledged Dumbledore was perhaps a shade better. But hold on. The Elder Wand shouldn't give you just a shade's worth of advantage.
No, not at all.
It should give you absolute, undeniable supremacy in a duel. It's the most powerful magical artifact in existence. How did Dumbledore overcome the unbeatable unless some fundamental rule of magic was overriding the power of the Hallow?
This is where we bring in the concept of the magical echo, specifically the priori incantatem parallel. We know Harry and Voldemort were linked by their shared wand, Core Holly, and Phoenix Feather from the same phoenix, Fawk, and that forced a rare and unprecedented priori incantatem situation in the graveyard.
Right, the wands recognized their twinhood, and the victim's wand was forced to repeat its most recent spells. Now let's look at Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Their wands, at the time of the three-way duel that killed Ariana, did not share a core. Dumbledore used his original wand before he ever claimed the Elder Wand. However, the sources detail that there was an initial design for Dumbledore's first wand in the Fantastic Beasts development notes that was ultimately changed. And the theory suggests this was done precisely because the initial design may have too heavily foreshadowed the ultimate plot point.
And what was that foreshadowed plot?
The theory is that Dumbledore's wand, or at least the wand he used after the 1945 duel, would be the Elder, shared a core with Grindelwald's original wand. If that were the case, their legendary duel in 1945 would have forced a priori incantatem situation, just like Harry and Voldemort experienced in 1995.
And what's fascinating is that the later Fantastory, Secrets of Dumbledore, actually shows their magic reacting in a way that suggests a deep, familial connection. It's almost like a forced priori incantatem effect is active, which cements the idea that the situation between Harry and Voldemort is a direct magical echo of Dumbledore and Grindelwald.
It's such a powerful narrative device because it suggests that the core conflict of the wizarding world is structurally symmetric. If Dumbledore experienced the impossible limitations of priori incantatem firsthand, it explains why he was able to pick up on those circumstances so easily decades later when Harry faced Voldemort.
And this ties directly back to our premise.
Right. If Dumbledore knew about one rare, unique magical circumstance priori incantatem by experiencing it firsthand, what if that's exactly how he also knew about the other rare, unique magical Sacrificial? It would explain his rapid, deep, and intimate understanding of the unique protection surrounding Harry. He didn't read about it, he lived under it.
The timeline of the conflict really drives this idea of a repeating magical battle home, doesn't it? We know the famous duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald took place in 1945, according to that chocolate frog card. But the Fantastic Beasts story, which chronicles the rise of Grindelwald, begins 19 years prior.
And 1926 is profoundly significant because it is the exact same year that Tom Riddle, who would become Lord Voldemort, was born.
Wow. The symmetry is it's too perfect. It suggests that the larger magical battle between the forces of fear and the forces of love isn't linear. It is cycling through time, seeking new hosts to fight the same fundamental battle, one generation the next.
It's the universe rerunning the same program.
Yeah.
The narrative arc of the Fantastic Beasts series is designed to show us the historical precedent for the events that later befall Harry. It's giving Dumbledore the foundational experience necessary to understand the later conflict. We know the 1945 duel is coming, but we're trying to figure out how Dumbledore exited it triumphant against the unbeatable wand. And the answer, the source material suggests, lies in the power of love that Grindelwald cast aside decades earlier. Okay, before we jump into the reconstruction of the family tragedy, we have to establish the rules. Let's define the critical mechanism of sacrificial love, because as the sources clarify, it's not simply dying for someone. There's a crucial, non-negotiable nuance required for the enchantment to take hold. This is absolutely key. This is key to understanding both Harry's survival and Dumbledore's history. You cannot simply be murdered and have the protection spring forth.
So it's not just about dying.
No. For the powerful enchantment to be enacted, the Dark Wizard, the caster of the killing spell, must explicitly give the victim the chance to live, and the victim must then choose death anyway, solely for the purpose of protecting their love.
So we look back at Lily Potter. Voldemort offered her the choice to step aside. He did that because of his commitment to Severus.
Yes.
She refused that lifeline. She chose to die for Harry, and in doing so, she closed the circle and enacted the ultimate enchantment that rebounded the killing curse. The choice is the magical catalyst.
The intention, the ultimate act of selflessness, is what makes the magic ancient, rare, and immensely powerful. It's a magic that operates outside the standard rules of spellcasting because it harnesses the rawest emotional intent.
Okay, so the question for the Dumbledore parallel. Was there someone present during Dumbledore's defining tragedy to die? And the person present that we literally know died during that, the one that resulted in Dumbledore's lifelong, is his sister, Ariana.
And this brings us back to that agonizing, confused, and devastating moment in Dumbledore's youth. Dumbledore admits to Harry that he spent a lifetime paralyzed by the fact that he never knew which of the three participants, Albus, Aberforth, or Grindelwald, cast the specific spell that killed his sister.
Right. That's the source of his deepest, most debilitating.
That fear, the fear that he cast the spell, is what kept him from confronting Grindelwald for so long. He was paralyzed by the possibility of his own culpability. But the theory posits that Grindelwald knew the truth, but it wasn't the truth Dumbledore feared about the cast. Grindelwald knew he had killed Ariana, but he also knew this fact came at a terrible cost to his own cause. He knew because he was the one who, in his fury, provided the crucial choice that enabled the sacrificial love enchantment to activate, not for Ariana, but for Albus.
But wait. How can we be sure Grindelwald or any wizard of that time would even recognize sacrificial love? If it was so rare, wouldn't it have been, forgotten lore?
That's a fair challenge. But we have to remember the caliber of these wizards. The sources emphasize that wizards of this exceptional level, Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and later Voldemort, they have thoroughly plundered the depths of ancient magic.
They weren't just studying seventh-year textbooks.
No, they were searching for the absolute fundamentals of magical power. They would be aware of the existence and mechanics of sacrificial love protection, even if it was rarely, if ever, successfully enacted.
So this isn't about knowing a specific incantation. It's about recognizing a fundamental, irresistible law of nature, like gravity, but in the magical world.
Precisely. It's a field unto itself, accessible only through immense personal cost or emotional power, not technique. It's why dark wizards fear it so much. It's the one thing that can negate their power that they cannot simply counter with a standard spell.
Okay, we have the emotional context and the magical mechanism. Now let's use the source's hypothetical scenario to reconstruct that three-way duel. This is the moment where the events of 1899 become the blueprint for 1981. We have to try and visualize this scene full of chaos, teenage rage, and terror.
So imagine the scene. It's an escalating, desperate fight between three young, immensely powerful individuals. Grindelwald is likely winning. He's asserting his dominance and perhaps torturing Aberforth, using him as a way to get Albus to submit to his grand vision.
And Albus, consumed by conflicting loyalties, his brother, his sister, and the dark promise of his best friend, is pleading with Grindelwald to stop. He's probably trying to argue the ethical point that he and Gellert had discussed countless times, for the greater good.
And then, in a moment of lingering human connection or just sheer frustration with Albus's moralizing, Grindelwald gives in to the plea, but not by walking away. Instead, he turns his full fury toward Albus, intending to kill his one true rival, saying something like, "If you won't join me, you must be removed."
And before the killing blow can land, Ariana intervenes.
Right.
We know that she had highly unstable, suppressed, magical power, an obscurus. She jumps in the way, or perhaps her magical instability lashes out, but she is defiantly protecting her brother Albus.
And crucially, Grindelwald, focused on Albus, sees Ariana as collateral damage or a nuisance. He casts her aside, maybe a powerful non-lethal spell like a disarming charm or knockback jinx.
Yeah.
And he says, perhaps dismissively, "You don't need to die."
There it is.
That is the pivotal, horrific moment. He offers her the chance to live even if she is still injured or incapacitated.
And she chooses to intervene and die anyway, likely trying to shield Albus as Grindelwald is aiming at. Her death, tied to her suppressed magical power as an obscurial, causes a huge, catastrophic magical explosion, a cataclysmic release of dark, pent-up energy, and that immediately casts doubt and chaos.
This is the genius as the narrative struck. The obscurus explosion makes it impossible for anyone, Albus, Aberforth, or Grindelwald, to definitively know who cast the lethal spell. It obscures the truth through sheer magical overpressure.
And that chaos is precisely what causes Grindelwald to preventing him from ever casting the Avada Kedavra on. But here is the profound, terrifying core insight that connects fate. Even if Grindelwald had managed to cast the killing curse in the chaos, it wouldn't have
worked. Because of that singular, awful act of self-sacrifice, Albus Dumbledore is protected always and forever against Gellert Grindelwald.
And Grindelwald knows.
And Grindelwald, being the master of ancient magic that he is, instantly knows it. He understands that the price of his own cruelty in that moment, The choice he offered Ariana was the creation of an impenetrable shield for his rival.
Just sit with that realization for a second, because it fundamentally reframes Dumbledore's entire life. Grindelwald is essentially defeated in 1899, not 1950.
In a way, yes. He knows, based on the magical rebound that follows Ariana's death, that he cannot defeat Dumbledore through direct lethal force. His own magic would rebound on him, just like Voldemort's did decades later. His primary weapon, killing his enemy, is nullified against the one person who matters most.
And this insight also clears up a major timeline ambiguity regarding the Blood Pact. Since Albus and Grindelwald were dueling, the Blood Pact must have been non-existent at that moment.
That's right. The sources suggest the Blood Pact couldn't have been created until after Ariana's death. The pact wasn't the reason they couldn't duel. It was a consequence of the magic that made dueling pointless. This protection, born from unimaginable tragedy and guilt, became a sort of brilliant, albeit passive, magical defense for Dumbledore against the only person in the world potentially more powerful than him, a person who was obsessed with conquering and destroying it. It was a magical check.
So now we can connect this magical insight to the next several decades of magical combat. This realization that Dumbledore was invulnerable to his direct lethal force must have fundamentally changed Grindelwald's strategic goal. Knowing Dumbledore is protected by Sacrificial, he realizes the Elder Wand alone won't secure victory.
It creates a necessary shift in strategy. Grindelwald now understands two things. One, he can't attack Albus with the killing curse or other lethal spells because the sacrificial love would kill him instead.
Yeah.
Two, due to the emotional fallout and the subsequent creation of the Blood Pact, Albus can't attack him either. The situation is a magical and emotional stalemate.
So Grindelwald needed a new weapon, something that operated outside the laws of standard magic. He had just witnessed the cataclysmic dark power of the Obscurus explosion caused by Ariana's death.
And that is the moment his focus shifts entirely. He realized that this raw, unstable, nonverbal, pure force of magical nature and Obscurus might be potentially more powerful than both of them combined. And crucially, it might be the only force chaotic and untamed enough to overcome the sacrificial love enchantment, which relies on intent and the casting of a specific lethal spell.
This then becomes the definitive reason why Grindelwald spends his time seeking out Creed. It's not about the Elder Wand, he collects that anyway to belittle power, but he needed a non-magical, pure force of nature weapon, powerful enough to defeat Albus despite the protection granted by him.
The Elder Wand is for show. The Obscurus is the weapon specifically engineered to break the Dumbledore protection. If you are unbeatable, you need something that doesn't play by the rules of conventional dueling. The sources paint this as a brilliant, if desperate, strategic move by Grindelwald, necessitated entirely by his earlier fatal error with Ariana.
It also offers a much more elegant explanation for the timing of the Blood Pact. The theory suggests Grindelwald proposed or agreed to the pact after Ariana's death, knowing he couldn't successfully attack Dumbledore.
Exactly. The pact served two masterful purposes. First, it prevented Dumbledore, his only true rival, from pursuing him and interfering with his rise to power. And second, it bought him decades to acquire the Elder Wand and search for a suitable non-conventional weapon like Credence.
It transformed their conflict from a duel to a decades-long game of magical chess.
And what's beautifully tragic is that the source notes that Credence eventually turns on Grindelwald too because of, wait for it, love. The pattern of ancient pure love magic overcoming pure calculated power repeats itself across Grindelwald's entire life, right up until his capture.
So let's apply this new insight to the final legendary duel in 1945. The sources describe it as epic, possibly going on for ages, but ultimately it was fruitless for Grindelwald. He was wielding the unbeatable Elder Wand. He would have gained every advantage. He may have gained an opening for a clear, final killing shot.
But at that precise moment, he realizes the truth, not just intellectually, but deep in his magical core. He simply cannot win. Unlike Voldemort, Grindelwald remembers the old magic, the painful lesson learned in 1899, and he knows that even the unbeatable Elder Wand cannot outmatch the raw power of Ariana's sac. He is magically checkmated.
The realization must have been crushing, the ultimate defeat. If he attacks Albus with the killing curse, the spell rebounds and he dies. If he doesn't attack, he loses the duel anyway because Dumbledore, even without the is a superior wizard. This realization of utter magical explains the white flag or surrender referenced by
her slanted story, claiming it wasn't a duel but a concession, was accurate in its essence. Grindelwald conceded defeat, not to Dumbledore's momentary superior strength, but to an unbreakable ancient enchantment that he himself had accidentally triggered 4 decades earlier.
This complex theory that Dumbledore was saved by Sacrificial, it just resolves so many contradictions. It explains why Grindelwald's strategy pivoted to seeking the Obscurus. It explains how Dumbledore defeated the supposedly unbeatable wand. And most importantly, it explains how Dumbledore knew exactly what had happened decades later with such immediate certainty.
He knew because the exact same powerful, rare, ancient protection was afforded to him by his sister. Dumbledore's depth of knowledge about the unique shield Harry had wasn't intellectual or theoretical. It was painful, personal, and based on the most formative, defining, and agonizing event of his entire life.
When Dumbledore saw that little boy on the doorstep, he wasn't just looking at a unique survivor. He was looking at the living, magical proof, sacrifice of love, work. He immediately knew the mechanism, necessary cost of that sacrifice. That's why he was able to act with such precise certainty that night at the doors. His reaction was, it was memorable.
So, we've synthesized the core takeaway for you, the listener. Dumbledore's greatest strategic asset, his ability to understand Harry's specific protection, was derived from his greatest personal failure and tragedy. This connection transforms Dumbledore's character from nearly a brilliant strategist into a deeply wounded, empathetic guide who saw himself in Harry's fate.
It puts a whole new, heavier meaning on the idea of magical echoes and cycles of conflict throughout This wasn't just two sets of enemies facing off apart. It was the same fundamental pure power fueled by unbreakable till, finally, the love prevailed for good.
Indeed. It also fundamentally changes our perception of Dumbledore's invulnerability. He wasn't just cautious, he was invincible against that specific threat from Grindelwald.
And that leads us to a powerful, provocative final thought to leave you with. Since Dumbledore was protected always and forever against Grindelwald by Ariana's sacrificial love, what subtle ways might that permanent, guaranteed protection have influenced Dumbledore's decisions and actions against Grindelwald over the intervening decade, even beyond their physical confrontation?
If you are assured that the one person who can defeat you magically cannot kill you, does that change the risks you were willing to take? How did that guaranteed safety change the way Dumbledore played his chess game, manipulating other players like Snape, or orchestrating the search for Credence, knowing his own safety against the ultimate threat was guaranteed? It suggests Dumbledore was strategically maneuvering from a position of magical supremacy long before the 1945 duel even began, all thanks to a tragic choice made by his sister. That's a powerful thought to take with you as you reread the lore.